the Dean of the Women in the Senate.
Again, this is Charlene Mickens-Dukes, one of my favorite people for a very long time, and she's being honored to be inducted into the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just absolutely delighted to be here. I am honored, I'm humbled. I think this is just amazing, and to think that there is something I've done to be sitting here next to you is just awesome.
Yeah, well, you are awesome, and I think we just were talking about how you're working on the State Board of Education,
Yes.
which is preschool through 12th grade, and as well as at the community college, Prince George's Community College. So you're at all levels. Let me just interrupt for a minute to say that you're hearing all that noise behind us. These are the crowds gathering for the induction into the Hall of Fame. We want to explain to those watching the video that it isn't just that we're being unruly.
All right. All
Okay.
right. Well, it's amazing because I have been at Prince George's Community College since 1995. I came to Maryland as Vice President for Student Services, and just about almost 6 years ago, and on July 1 of 2007, I was appointed as president of the college, where we serve 44,000 students, and those students are doing great things all over the county, the region, and certainly the nation.
That's great.
And then I've had the pleasure of serving on the State Board of Education, gubernatorial appointment. Governor O'Malley appointed me in 2007, and just this past July, I was elected president of the State Board after having served as vice president for probably just about 3 terms.
So you have a unique hat in being 2 presidents at once.
And you know, it's amazing because with the State Board of Education, we are, through policy and regulation, having the opportunity to touch the lives of almost 1 million children enrolled in Maryland's public schools. And as you know, it's all about education reform and change and how we support students.
Absolutely. Tell me, is there anything that you can point to in your early life? What led you to do this kind of work, and why did it matter to you?
Well, I believe, and it has always been my mantra, that what led me here was coming from a family of service. And my parents were always about service and doing good work in the community. I have 8 brothers and sisters, and we were raised to do that, living next door to our grandparents, our aunts and our uncles, and even today, my mom and dad are always concerned about doing good for others, and not necessarily concerned about having others do good for them.
Sounds wonderful. What do you feel most proud of?
Well, I tell this story often. My father graduated from high school, and he wanted to be an architect. But at the time he graduated in the early 1940s, he was told that because he was good with his hands, he should pursue carpentry. My mom received her GED, her General Equivalency Diploma, when I was probably in the 8th or 9th grade, because I can remember sitting at the table and all of us helping her study. And for me, it was the opportunity that was provided through the civil rights movement, colleges and universities opening up to all types of students, and I always felt that I had this drive in me to do things that my parents couldn't do, but that they paved the way for us to do as their offspring. So that's what drives me. I have a son, and I hope that I'm serving in a way that when he looks back on his life, that he can take what I have tried to teach him and what his father has tried to teach him and do good things for people.
It's wonderful. Speaking of that, and about your son and the next generation coming up, is there anything that you, on a personal level, like to share and leave as a legacy to say to those young people as a message?
Well, you know, I think that we all have dreams and visions, and sometimes we don't necessarily accomplish those by moving down a straight and narrow road. Sometimes we have to turn left, sometimes we have to turn right. But you know, we get right back on that road, and we don't let anyone deter us from what we know in our heart is our life's work. And that's what I've tried to do as I've moved through my journey. I didn't always want to be a college president. Quite frankly, I wanted to teach English in high school, and I wanted to teach grammar. but I started working in higher education, and for me, I found a niche, not just in higher education, but in community colleges when you talk about access and opportunity for those who are underserved or underrepresented, and that's what's been important to me.
It's wonderful and important, and we hope that a lot of younger generation coming up will heed that message and work on those things and not be deterred.
Exactly. I think we have both a right and an obligation to help and support, to mentor, to guide, and advise.
That is a beautiful capsule. Thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thank you,
again.
Jill.
Next, I will welcome Aretha Bridgewater Sims to the podium to introduce her nominee, Dr. Charlene Dukes.
Thank you. I think Dr. Duke's senator is here. I told him that I'm doing this, but to introduce to you someone that the Washingtonian magazine called one of the 100 most powerful women in the Washington metropolitan area, Dr. Duke.
So I have to talk. And, you know, like college presidents do, we just bring out pieces of Xerox paper with bullets on them. But yes, I certainly do want to thank you all. This is such an honor and a pleasure. And it is not because of the work that I do. It is really because of all of the people who are with me and beside me at Prince George's Community College and at the Maryland State Board of Education and the Maryland State Department of Education. So I'd like to start off by just acknowledging a few people. I have with me today my classmates from Leadership Greater Washington, so thank you all for being here. We had class today and we all left early. Members of the Maryland State Board of Education and the State Superintendent, Dr. Lillian Lowry. My sisters, and what I believe is the greatest sorority in the world, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. My good friends, and they know who they are because they've been with us from the time we moved to Maryland in 1995, and their families helped to ensure that my son, Maurice, while we were working, was well-fed and well taken care of. So Carol and Gail, you know who you are, and thank you for that. Prince George's Community College, my colleagues who are here today working with me to serve 44,000 students, a predominantly black institution that is very much committed to access, opportunity, and success. The members of the Board of Trustees who lead and guide me and work with me every day, and thank you to the board members who are here, and my co-workers. I have a few co-workers in the room as well. And then I have my family, my brothers and my sisters and their families, and I'm just going to ask them to stand so you'll know who they are. My brothers and my sisters, you all know who you are. And my mom and dad would have been here today, but my dad is ill and was rushed to the hospital. And after almost 60 years of marriage, my mom was just insistent that she wasn't going to leave him, but she made sure that my son is over there videotaping all of this. So I would introduce you all to who has, since my husband and his father passed away, has become the probably second love of my life, and that's my son, Maurice Dukes. And then I'd like to thank the Maryland Women's Commission, and for me, most importantly, the Prince George's County Women's Commission, because I know that I wouldn't be standing here if it were not for all of you, your belief in me, and your belief that in some way that I've made a contribution, not just to Prince George's County, but to the state of Maryland. So thank you so much. You know, I'm really honored and humbled and just in awe at receiving this recognition, because I believe that all that I am and all that I can be is because of my faith my family, and my commitment to serve. And I'm just going to leave you with a very short story. We come from humble beginnings, and I tell this story often. I really didn't even know what it meant to sleep in your own bed until I went to college. I'm not going to call her out, but my youngest sister, we shared a bed from almost the time that she was born. And when I went away to college and I got in that single bed, because I went to college at times when they had single beds, not the kind of luxury living that young people have today, I remember rolling over and over and over and just touching the wall and not another warm body, and I didn't really know how to react to that, but it felt good, I will tell you that. But what I recall is that when my dad was growing up and he graduated from high school and he wanted to be an architect, and he was told, because it was the early 1940s, that probably the best he could do, because he was good with his hands, was to be a carpenter. And that he was directed and moved to do that kind of work. My mom did not graduate from high school, but I remember sitting around the table when I was probably in the 8th or 9th grade, and we all helped her as she studied for her GED. And then she actually received that GED as a person at the top of the class. And that was important to us, because what it said to us, and my dad, I will tell you, I don't ever recall him working less than 3 jobs. Now, I have 8 brothers and sisters, and there's probably a reason for that, because there were a lot of people to feed. And every Sunday I can recall when he would take us to a small ice cream place called All Wines. It was an ice cream store, and it was inexpensive enough that all 9 of us could get our own ice cream cone, and that was a good thing. It was also during a time that, thank goodness, there was no seatbelt law, because none of us would never all fit in a car at one time. But he would do that to give my mom a break so she could enjoy a few hours on Sunday afternoon to herself or with her friends. And as we would return home, he would sit outside of the steel mill, and those of you who are from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, or from Western PA, you know that we were riddled with steel mills all up and down the Ohio, Monongahela, and Allegheny rivers. And he would say, I work here every day, so none of you will ever have to. And I think that that's something that, quite frankly, has carried all of us through, that it is our commitment to live the dreams of our parents, our mom and dad. And then every night, I remember they would come into the room and we would say the Lord's Prayer in unison, and then he would stop and he'd say, what's the family motto? And the family motto was all for one and one for all. And that's the way we live our lives today. So thank you all so very much for anything that I could do here in Maryland. It's because it's all for one and one for all. Thank you.
Women's Heritage Center, and congratulations to Major General Linda Singh for your induction tonight in the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame. That's very exciting.
It is. Thank you.
Thank you for taking time to talk with us. It's not every day that I get to meet a Major General, so please tell me how you got into this career. Tell me about yourself as it relates to your military career and your leadership in the military.
Absolutely. So I never intended on joining the military when I was growing up. I really didn't know a lot about the military. And what got me into this is that I happened to be working in the mall in Frederick, Maryland. And at the time I was homeless. So I was kind of sleeping here and there. I had already quit school, and because I was trying to take care of myself.
How old were you then, may I ask?
I was 16 at the time, and I happened to run across a Maryland National Guard recruiting booth, and I started talking to them. I don't know what made me stop, but it was just one of those things. And the next thing I knew is that I was taking the test and signing papers. And I think what was very interesting is that even though I had quit school, I was an honor roll student, so I scored very well on the ASVAB test and was able to kind of pick my field. But I think what was exciting to me is I knew that I needed to get away, and I knew that I needed something to kind of give me that push start.
May I ask what year that was?
That was
approximately.
It was in 1981.
So, what was the National Guard? What did it look like then were other members of the National Guard in Frederick, Maryland at that time?
So the National Guard at that time was very male-oriented,
Yeah.
so there was a lot more males than females.
Sure.
We had our unit structure was very different. The unit that I joined out of Hagerstown, Maryland, actually had mechanized equipment, meaning it had track equipment versus wheeled vehicles.
Like the rubber things that go?
The rubber versus the hard track,
Got it,
exactly.
right, yeah.
And so it was, the Maryland Guard itself was a totally different organization at that point in time. And I think that what was very interesting for me is that it was, even though I had went to basic training and I did my advanced initial training, I still was having challenges just getting back and forth to drill at that time. And so it really hasn't changed. You still have to go to drill. You still have to show up and participate. But I think that the big thing that has really changed, especially for Maryland, is the types of capabilities that we have within the state. The things that have not changed is the fact that once you join the Maryland Guard and you become part of that family, it really is like a family, because you're there with individuals that stay for 30 and 40 years, and so you get to know people really, really well.
What were some of your job titles you had before you were Major General?
Some of the job titles that I've had has been, I was a personnel lead, so I worked in personnel, so personnel administration. I've done clerical work, so I've been kind of a clerk typist. I actually processed security clearances at one time as part of my administration duties, so I was like the clearance processor. I've been in training as a counterintelligence specialist, so I worked in that field for a little bit because I thought that was one of the directions that I was going to go.
So you had quite a career
So I
pathway.
have quite a career pathway. I've spent time working in operations shops enlisted, really working on training schedules and looking at, how do we set up our overall training for various units. And then once I became an officer, I became an ordnance officer, which is more on the maintenance side of things. And now we've kind of combined those, and we're really an overall logistics officer, so kind of a logistician.
So ordnance means weaponry or that kind of equipment?
Absolutely. Ordnance is weaponry. It's wheeled vehicles. It's also track vehicles. So one of the things that I got a chance to do when I went through training was to replace a power pack in a tank. And so I didn't get a chance to really do that the rest of my career, but I got a chance to do it at least in training.
I would imagine, now that you're a general, and now there are more women in the National Guard, particularly younger women, what kind of messages, or how are you, obviously you're a role model to them because of your rank, but what are some of the things that you've done to support both the women and the men, but also particularly to help the women that are there earn their stripes or their ranks?
Right. Now, especially from, I think, when I became a field grade officer, so that's really, looking at the major and lieutenant colonel level, it became extremely important for me to mentor other women. I mean, I've mentored across the board, but I really try to pay attention to where I'm finding those hidden gems and trying to mentor them along. Just, a lot of my mentors were male because I didn't have the female mentors necessarily. There are a couple of female officers that I built a relationship from when I was a lieutenant all the way up, and a number of them have retired as general officers, and a few of them, one of them actually works for me today as my chief of staff.
Oh,
And
nice.
so her and I have known each other for a long time, and she's been a huge mentor, but I felt like I needed to pay that forward as well. And so I really do get involved in the development of our people, and probably a little bit lower than what I probably should for a major general, but I think it's extremely important. And I will take the time out to talk with our female soldiers or even our male soldiers about their career, because I think that it's one thing for them to know they need to go through the regular wickets, but it's another thing for them to be starting to think about, well, what does their skill set mean? How do they broaden their capability? How do they become more diverse in terms of their background? And so when I start talking to them, I start talking about diversity. And I start talking about diversity in terms of diversity of capability, diversity of thought, that means people from different backgrounds, and then diversity of people. because I believe that in order to build a strong, competent team and a team of what I would consider to be excellent, I think that you need to have those different
You need each other.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter who they are, men or women, they are part of
Absolutely.
important life and death
Absolutely.
situations sometimes. The other thing I was thinking about, I think you have a new job.
I do.
Tell us about your new job.
So the new job, I am the Adjutant General for Maryland, and being the Adjutant General, I am over what I consider to be my 4 pillars, and the 4 pillars are the Air National Guard, the Army National Guard, Maryland Emergency Management, as well as Maryland Defense Force, and so those are the 4 pillars that kind of make up the military department.
That's a pretty big job, isn't it?
It is a pretty big job. I mean, I report and am responsible for the military department directly to the governor. So the governor is my boss, and it really requires me to work across all the other cabinet secretaries, where it makes sense, and really to work with the governor's staff, and then to work on the federal side with, big Army, big Air Force, and the National Guard Bureau. So it is a very different role that I've had than what I've had in the past. But what I'm finding is that I am enjoying the role because I'm getting a chance to really set change for the organization that I may not be able to see all of it today, but I'm going to be able to see it maybe 5 years down the road, and that is exciting to me.
Very exciting. Well, it's interesting because you were nominated and selected for the Hall of Fame before your job change. So you've had quite a spring, haven't you?
I have had quite a spring. It really started when I became the Assistant Adjutant General on the Army side. I think that the recognition started really coming my way mainly because it is a huge step. I mean, one, to make general, whether you're male or female, it's a very, very narrow field. And then 2, for it to be a female and then to be an African American female, I think it just says, leaps and bounds to the progress that we've made as women. And so that really excites me. Not so much that it's me doing this, it's really what does it mean for other women? And this really will help to set the tone for a lot of other young leaders, and that's probably the most exciting thing for me.
So what would be some of those messages be to young men and women, civilian or military, as we're going into a new era in terms of seeking peace? What would you say to those younger people?
Well, I think, I coach a lot of individuals, and one of the things that I always try to communicate to them is that they need to find their authentic self. I didn't understand that probably for the first half of my career, and
We're all struggling with that still, right?
I looked at other leaders, and I'm like, oh, I want to be like this person, and I'd see somebody else, and I'd say, I want to be like this person. You really do need to find, your authentic self, and what that means for you as a leader. I think what we have trouble with is, we see good leaders and we see bad leaders. What I think is interesting is that we're all good leaders, all within our own right. And I think that we need to learn what our strengths are and how do we play to those strengths. And I think that would totally change the dynamics in how we're perceived and how we're dealing with others. And so that's probably one of the things that I focus on the most, is trying to get young individuals to start understanding their authentic self first.
An important message. We've been talking with Major General Linda Singh. Thank you, Major General.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I appreciate that. And first, I would like to say thank you to the Women's Commission, because this is truly an honor. And, Turhan, where are you at, Turhan? So, thank you. And what, a lot of you don't know that, Turhan has been telling me for years, probably since I was a lieutenant or captain, I can't remember when. Every time he would see me, he said, there's something else in your future. You need to keep doing it. There's something else in your future. And so I want to thank you for nominating me, and it's amazing. So, joining with me today is my husband, Raj, who's been with me ever since I've been, actually before I got commissioned, because in the commissioning program that I went through, the officer candidate school, you have to wear like what we call these turtle shells. And they always made the new class, they may not do that anymore, but they always made the new class paint them. And so even though we weren't married at the time, I felt like he was a keeper because he painted all 32 of those shells. And they loved him for it. He shellacked them, they looked really good. And then I'm also joined by both my daughters. So my oldest daughter, who she's going to kill me for saying this, but she's a detective in Prince George's County Police, has been for about 10 years. And so she is going to be and then my youngest daughter, who is finishing up her last semester at UMBC as a biology major. And she's going to intern this summer, right? And then she's going to apply to Johns Hopkins for a post-graduate program. So hopefully she will get on into Johns Hopkins and go into medicine. Who knows, or maybe you'll be up here at some point doing that. But I also have the unique privilege, and typically, you know, I would say something about my background, and I'm not, because there's tons of stories out there. But what I think is unique about tonight is when I think about when I started my career and when I first got my commission, one of the individuals, and I do believe she was captain at the time, that met me coming off the stage because I was the distinguished graduate. And she wanted to congratulate me, and it was really her and another officer who's not here tonight, so she's retiring, which is General Solomon, but General Diener, please stand. When I think about when I was on the ledge, General Diener talked me off the ledge, right? So she's been a mentor, a coach, whether she knows it or not, she's been a mentor and a coach for so many. And when I think of, you know, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her kind of saying, you know, you need to keep going, you go, girl. I mean, she really just had this inspiration. It's like from the first time that I met her, and now E3, so private first class, and she was one of my cooks. And she took care of me every single time, from year after year after year. And so when I think about, you know, what it means for me to be able to get this award and to be an honoree, it's really not about me. It's about them, and it's about the future. So my hat's off to you all. I salute you. Thank you, and God bless.